Hi, and welcome to another episode of Garmology, a podcast about clothes and stuff. Now, today it's another episode about shoes, but not just any shoes. We're off to Canada to have a word with Andrew. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Andrew Turriff, and I live on the east coast of Canada. And for the last couple of years, I've been working to produce Turiff Functional Footwear. We're making anatomical fitting, rugged, versatile shoes using traditional shoemaking techniques that are repairable, very well made, and really comfortable.
Now, functional footwear. I sense we're going to hear a lot more about that, but I'm curious, how did you get started making shoes? And feel free to go way back in time here.
Uh, well, I've been in the footwear industry or working in shoes for the past 12 or 14 years now. Um, but I came at it from a background in fine arts, which I think you've heard before. Um, so I was going to school for fine arts, doing sculpture and ceramics, like potting on a wheel, making clay and various material sculptures. And I had a lot of fun doing that. But at the time, I thought, like, I don't know that I am going to be able to make a career out of this. Um, Even though it was a lot of fun, I enjoyed it. I was trying to think practically. And I always liked sneakers. That was sort of my jumping in point for getting into footwear. I was a sneakerhead, big into athletic shoes, skate shoes, whatever looked good. I wanted to get it. And
Right.
um, so I thought maybe I can take my aesthetic talents and become a footwear designer. Um, and so the I guess the place the first where I started, I lived in Vancouver, which is where I grew up in British Columbia, Canada. And there's one really creative brand out there called Fluevog shoes, and I was lucky enough to have a connection with them. And they let me come and hang out there for a couple months and learn about the business, see the design process, just see how a footwear company operates. And after the 3 month term, I was really still into it and excited. And so I had applied to schools because I sort of come from a pretty regular traditional background where schooling was the route to things.
Mhm.
So I applied to school in England at the London College of Fashion. And
Okay.
I was lucky enough to get in and have the opportunity to go over. And so I went over to London and I lived there for 2 years and I studied shoemaking and footwear design. Um, and it really, I went over there with the intention, thinking like, I'm going to work for a company as a designer. I don't need to make shoes. I'm just going to do the aesthetics of it. Um, Likely work on a computer. But while I was there, we had the opportunity um, to make shoes and just design shoes. Some people went in one path or the other. Um, excuse me. Um, and I really fell in love with the making of shoes. Um, so it, like I said, I expected to go the design route, and I still imagined after I was at school that that was what I would be doing. But as I learned more and more about the making process, I really enjoyed it and dove deeper and deeper into that. Sorry. Um, so uh, while at school, they did teach us a lot about design process, and we got to learn about fashion history and how we could build a collection, how we can keep generating ideas year after year. And lots of people were really interested in that segment. But there was also a sort of a core group of us who really were excited about the making process. And we had some really good teachers there that were there to help and teach you how to create your prototypes and you could really put in as much time as you wanted to learn the craft. Um, so I did spend a lot of time making shoes and learning the basics at that point. Um, And when I guess while I was at school, I had the opportunity to do a couple of internships. And when I finished up school, I was lucky enough to get an internship through Nike, and they placed me in Cole Haan. At the time, they owned Cole Haan, which was a dress shoe company. I think they're still around.
Yeah.
And so I got to travel over to New York. When I was in New York, I got to see a really big company operating. And um, I guess it was really interesting to see how they came up with ideas, how they produced, how they developed with factories overseas. But it just, you're sitting on the computer all day. It didn't have the same feel as being involved directly with the shoemaking. Um, so when my time came to finish up with Cole Haan, um, I wanted to go back home. And so I moved back to Vancouver. And that's really when my actual making journey started, I would say, because I, I mean, I was hassling that there's one uh, Pacific Northwest boot company right in Vancouver. It was an old company called Dayton Boots. It had had
Yeah.
some ups and downs, but they were still making shoes in traditional ways. They're doing Goodyear welted, and they're doing nailed down construction, like a whole variety of different shoemaking styles. And eventually they let me in to work with them. I worked a little bit in the back. I helped with sales, and the owner at the time was really nice. He let me try and like revamp all the old styles, and bring in new materials and kind of modernize, make things fit in with the landscape of traditional footwear at the time. Um, and so while I was there, like I said, I had time in the back. That's where I really started to learn. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here a little bit. Um, like the really, that's where I really started to learn the in-depth um, craft of shoemaking from the older people who were working in the factory, who had all the little tips and tricks and things that I wasn't learning at school. And it's just like the time spent um, making over and over again that I really started to develop the skills. And um, I mean, I loved the world of footwear. This old factory that I was working in Vancouver was from the late 40s. You could dig in the basement there, find all sorts of old components and like interesting materials to pull up and create new old styles. It was a lot of fun. Um, well, it was a small team. While I was there, um, the head maker, he ended up leaving, and I got thrust into his position. And he would do anything from make patterns, prepare the uppers to be made. He also did custom lasts. This was really my first um, introduction into like I really like shoes up to this point, but I hadn't really thought about the foot as
Mhm.
something that you really need to think about. It could just seem like an aesthetic uh, endeavor, really, to me, up until this point. Like you're creating something that looks nice, it's wearable. I guess I thought of it as something functional, but I never really thought of the foot as something you need to consider that much. And like, surprisingly, a lot of footwear designers and shoemakers, they don't think a lot about the foot.
I'm not surprised
Sorry.
at all. I think
So,
that it tells a bit about all the different fitting footwear we get that they haven't actually considered that people have very differing feet.
well, and a lot of the stuff that you're getting fit into, like especially in the traditional footwear world, or welted or um, higher end shoes, like a lot of those designs were made a long time ago, and we had different ideas of what foot needed, and a lot of it was very stylized. Um, and I mean, a lot of shoes are really stylized still. But I think since then and now, which we can talk about later, I think we just have like a much deeper understanding of the foot and what it's capable of. And so that's sort of what had uh, what you can hear about later of how I came to Turiff Functional Footwear. But when I was at Dayton, I got the opportunity to learn how to create custom lasts, and the last is the stylized foot form that gives the shape and style of a shoe. So that would be
Mhm.
the last that I'm using for Turiff Functional Footwear. Um, but so that I really enjoyed that process of making lasts for people that fit better than other things that they were used to. You're matching their measurements to a pre-existing shape that would give the style that they had ordered, and it is quite sculptural because you'd build up on a last, or you'd be carving away to create the shape and create the correct fit for them. Um, and again, my idea of what the correct fit has evolved over time since then. But that was my first taste at fitting people for shoes and seeing how happy they were when they were getting something that felt a lot more comfortable than what they were used to.
Mm.
Um, and amongst that, like I said, I was working on my skills, getting the opportunity to do some design. It was really hands on there. Um, from Dayton, I did some odd design jobs and making jobs, but I ended up in California after that, where I
Getting
was working
around.
for I bounced around a little bit, where I ended up working for uh, it's a small studio called No One Footwear. They don't exist anymore, but we were making bespoke sneakers for the Los Angeles clientele and whoever else was around. But um, that was a pretty exciting time. We were right in Los Angeles. We got to meet a lot of interesting people. Lots of athletes would come through. Lots of people from Nike and Adidas and all sorts of big hype companies. Um, and it was quite an exciting time, I guess. And within that little shop, I didn't do design. I would contribute a little bit, but I was there helping development. So there's two designers. They would come to me and the other guys. It was just a small team of three guys, and we would sorry. Um, we would help turn their ideas into shoes. Um, and because it was such a small team, we had to be involved in every aspect of the shoemaking. And it was like a great boot camp, again, for working on my skills and getting to see a different side of things. Because when I was in Vancouver working at Dayton Boots, it's much more like rugged and rough style of making. Whereas in California, we were doing more finer sneaker styles where it's a little more like just the making of the uppers is a little finer. There's a lot more finicky little detail work, and so um, just that really improved my skills. Um, and like I said, it really opened my eyes up to the world of sneakers and hype, um, and it showed me how marketing is so important. And and
Yeah.
at that point, like I was starting to get a little bit like frustrated. Like I had always imagined that like a really good product would speak for itself, but I sort of live in this idealistic world. But as I was working there and seeing how the bigger athletic brands operated, you could see that like it wasn't necessarily about what is the best product, what is the best thing for the customer. It's just about like what they wanted to push each year. And so that was not like my favorite aspect of that world. But like I said, it was a great opportunity, a lot of fun. I met lots of people. My skills really were improving. Um, while I was there, um, I had the opportunity, or I was asked by some of the bigger athletic companies to come work for them on a couple of occasions. Um, and I thought, like, oh, this is it. Finally, I've had my opportunity. I'm going to get in with one of these companies. I got a career coming up, you know. I can sort of, set myself up and work. But when I went and visited their studios, like at this point, I really wanted to be a great shoemaker. And I visited them, and it's just like it was not about shoes. It wasn't about making good shoes. It's just like constantly churning out new ideas, new concepts. Um, like I said, back to the marketing and technology. Just they're all about innovation and design, but it just didn't feel like there was real integrity behind the footwear. It was more just about like what's next, what's next, what's next. It wasn't improving, or it wasn't about the customer, and that was those are sort of things that I've always been interested in.
Hmm.
So really, it's just I visited these places with job offers, and it just didn't feel right. And so it sort of changed my, uh, I guess, my trajectory there. Um, and I had to find a new path. Um, Meanwhile, I was in California. I would ride a bicycle to work every day. And one day on my way home, a car turned left and it hit me, and I ended up breaking my shoulder. Um, and so I was out of shoemaking. I was off for like 6 months. We're down in the US, and I wasn't working. I wasn't generating any income. So at this point, we thought, me and my wife decided, maybe it's time to head back to Canada. This was after 2 years. So it wasn't a huge stint, but enough time. And so we were looking on where to come to back to Canada. My wife comes from the East Coast, which is where we are now, and so we decided to come to the uh, smaller town, or come to a smaller town of Halifax. Um, Sorry, and but coming out this way, there's no footwear design, there's no exciting footwear industry like there is on the West Coast or in other bigger cities. And so um, I took a job doing orthopedic footwear. Uh, so that's,
Oh.
working with, usually it's like a doctor who will prescribe something, but there's also people who just specifically prescribe orthotics, which are inserts which will hold your arch in place. Uh, and we're doing all sorts of modifications to footwear to alleviate pain or help with someone's movement. And I thought, hey, this is a really great opportunity to learn more about the foot, to learn um, like how I can help people, how I can use my shoemaking skills to help people. Um, so we came out here, and I got into these little, they call them labs, orthopedic labs, and like they're really quite a hustle. You're churning out insoles mostly, um, over and over again. It's all to alleviate pain, help people with like diabetes, mechanical issues, things like that. And I've always been a little bit skeptical of this world. I had a friend in high school whose dad was a podiatrist, and he always told me that things like inserts were kind of borderline on whether they actually worked or like what was the purpose of them.
Oh.
Um, and so I always had this skeptical idea of like, is this really the right approach for someone's foot or for improving? Um, but I was still interested in learning. And the other aspect, I guess, here was when I was working in these places, I would see thousands and thousands of feet. Lots of people pass through. So many people have foot pain. Um, and I would see their feet, and I would see the shoes that they're wearing. And um, it just like it was so incredibly common that people did not fit properly into their shoes. And just like the types of feet that people have just don't match up with contemporary footwear or the lasts that we're making shoes on. And even in the orthopedic world of footwear, of like off the shelf orthopedic shoes, those shoes I was finding they're not like most people come in, they say they got wide feet. You want to wear a wide pair of shoes, but everybody, like even in the orthopedic world, we're constrained by fashion and by aesthetics, like what we think a shoe is supposed to be. And nowadays, what we think a shoe should be is narrow and sleek, kind of elongated in the toe. Um, but that's not actually what our foot is shaped like. And so the orthopedic footwear brands, they're still trying to work within that model. And so rather than making a shoe that's actually wider for the foot, it's generally just taller.
Mm.
So you have the volume there, but you're still getting the foot is still getting constricted at the toes. Your toes are getting kind of funneled into a shape. Um, and so it didn't make sense to me at first. Like I thought that I mean I've worked in footwear, I've made custom lasts. Like why are brands not making shoes that fit well? Like why don't they open it up a little bit better? Like even if it's just in the orthopedic world, they should be better accommodating to the foot. I just wasn't seeing it. Um, so this that got me thinking in terms of fit. Like I wanted to make. I thought like this. There's got to be a market for this. Shoes that are wider that will fit people better. Like who doesn't want to be comfortable in their footwear? Um, so that's sort of one path of my career of what led me to where I am is the making. So wanted to be a designer. Learned I like crafting a lot and sort of followed that path. Um, the other side that sort of led me to this functional footwear um, is my personal interest in fitness. I've always been a really big fitness guy. I love exercise, running, lifting weights, whatever. I've tried like every single style of exercise that exists. Um, and
Yeah.
sort of, whatever's on trend, like I think, oh yeah, well maybe that'll, help me out, help me be bigger, stronger, faster.
Yeah.
For some reason, I was obsessed with the idea of being, the biggest, fastest, strongest. There's no real reason behind that. I'm not an athlete, a professional athlete or anything, but I think that's just sort of like ingrained into us in culture to be bigger, better, faster than the next person.
Hmm.
Um, Along this side, I always got to wear the coolest, Nike sneakers or whatever training. They're, the newest tech running shoe or whatever kind of athletic shoe. So that was sort of like part of the fun of fitness for me was that it combined my love of sneakers, especially at the beginning. Um, and so athletic or being uh, doing fitness, it was big. And so in parallel with my shoemaking career, I've always been exercising. Um, but I was getting pain. Like I found I appeared fit, but I always had little issues, like injuries would always come up in my feet, my hips, my legs. It was a problem. And I'm sort of obsessed with like moving freely. Um, and I didn't really think about it as much when I was younger. But as I, slowly get older, you feel things even more. These
Mm.
kind of injuries compound. Um, and uh, when we moved to the East Coast of Canada, it was early, like right when COVID came around. And so I wasn't allowed to go into the gym, which was my usual sort of routine. And I was running a lot. Um, and just I was running and I had to be at work. I was on my feet all day. Um, and I was getting, you know, pain in my feet, tingling in my heels, tingling in my calves. Like I said, I appeared fit, but I was not functional as a person. Like I wasn't the functional person that I wanted to be.
Mm.
Um, and because I worked at these orthopedic clinics, they were telling me, you got to support your feet more. Got to wear uh, big cushion, big support under your foot. That's going to ease your pain. Um, and so I did. I wore a lot of the orthopedic footwear, standing on my feet all day, and um, it was helpful to a point. Like it sort of dulls the pain, when you're well supported under your arch and with a big cushion underneath. But I was not seeing any improvement like day to day in my movement or anything like that. And I just didn't like I wasn't convinced that this was the route for me. Like I couldn't imagine myself just like dulling this pain in my feet and in my back and in my legs, um, and going through the rest of my life like this. And so I uh, early, like one of my first internships while I was at shoe school was with a barefoot shoe brand called Vivo Barefoot.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
and so many people, they're like one of the most like well-known barefoot companies out there.
yeah.
And just working with them was really, really interesting. But at the time, I didn't really think that deeply about it because I was more interested in design. It was just my first opportunity while in school to be with a different company. And so, I took it all in. I tried it out at the time, but I didn't uh, embrace the barefoot world at that point.
Mm,
And if you, I think at the time I ended up giving myself injuries because if you move into barefoot athletics too quickly, you can easily hurt yourself, especially if you're not ready in your feet or your legs, if you're not strong enough. But so I thought back, like, okay, maybe these guys have something. And so rather than go the big like cushion and supportive route that the orthopedic employers had been recommending to me, I thought like that's not doing anything. It's not like being proactive. Like, yes, it's like I said, it dulls the pain, but I'm not like I want to see improvement. So I took my shoes off instead of wearing the big shoes. And that's really where I started to feel some fixes in my body. And it's not an instant fix or anything. But the greatest thing about like removing big cushion stack and like opening your toes up and getting rid of your support that I felt was that I felt this like awareness again of what I was doing with myself, what I was doing with my body, like the impacts that I was putting on myself, is which is something that gets sort of disguised when you're wearing the sort of the big tech shoes for fitness and athletics, and even just day to day walking around, it lets you pound a little bit harder on your joints, which over time it doesn't feel great. It sort of compounds.
mm.
Um, and so like I was finding that even though my whole career had been based around shoemaking and footwear design, the like this other aspect of my life was being solved by taking those things away. And so it was this like weird disconnect. And um, so I like I said, when I was working in California, I had grown a little bit disillusioned with the footwear world and how it, it wasn't necessarily good product or what helped the customer or the consumer that was being pushed. There's more, this season's new material, this color, this tech gimmick. And so that one area I was a little bit frustrated with. Um, and then when I added this whole side of thinking like I can get more improvement to my body without these gimmicks and the technology or the cushion or the support, I just like started feeling uh, kind of like lost in my career. I didn't know, like footwear just didn't seem that useful, I guess.
So, your colleagues in the orthopedic industry, what were they like when you just sort of said, no, cannot do this stuff anymore?
Well, I mean, I kept working because I needed a job, but I mean, we would debate all the time. I mean, I would come into work wearing like very minimalist shoes, and they are recommending the opposite. Um, and I mean, the, the they the orthopedic world, they've been pushing the same style of um, I don't know what's the word you want to I could use, like the same remedy for a long, long time. Like
Mm.
arch support, support your arch, hold your foot rigid. Like to me, this idea, it makes sense. Like a long time ago, like 100 years ago, when these ideas started to come up, to hold your foot static, hold your foot rigid. These people, a lot of people who are having pain, they're working long days on their feet. So it
Yeah.
makes sense. Give yourself that support. But but I do feel that nowadays we have much more knowledge about the body. We have much more knowledge about how we can prepare ourselves, how we can train our bodies to be ready for a day of work, for life.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not saying that you don't have to entirely go without any kind of support. Like maybe sometimes you do need it. It helps to with recovery. But I just found that, like personally, I want to improve. I don't want to be declining, or at least I want to fight against the decline as much as possible as
Mm.
I age. And I found minimalist footwear, what I would call functional footwear, shoes that allow your feet to move naturally, to spread out, to really get involved again in your movement. Um, I just found that that gave me such a better result, uh, and so much more comfort. Um, just the benefits are uh, so much greater than wearing the cushioned and structured footwear. At least that's from my perspective. And now bringing it back to my functional footwear, I saw the great benefits of this like natural style footwear. I had this background in traditional shoemaking and sneakers and all sorts of variety of shoes. Um, and I had seen that the average person just really does not fit well into footwear. And so all of these avenues together, I thought maybe I can make something meaningful out of this, something that really is like contributing to people's well-being through footwear, which I had seen as started to feel was like a little bit superficial in a way, so aesthetics driven. Maybe that's what I should have said before, but I was feeling that footwear was so that there just wasn't like a real substance to it anymore because of that, like the like push for a new shoe every year. It had become superficial, and shoes at the core are a tool to help us navigate the world, because there's lots of things that might poke your foot. There's a lot of weird uneven surfaces out there, so we need a protective covering. And we're just like moved so far away from this idea that a shoe is like really a tool that's going to help you navigate it. Rather, like shoes had become, or what I felt, shoes had become objects that sort of gave the idea that they're helping you navigate the world, or whatever, but whatever situation you're finding yourselves in. But they were moving further and further away from what your body and your feet really need. And so, like I said, I wanted to bring these things all together. Um, like I said earlier, I have this idealistic view that um, we can make great product, and that should be enough to like uh, be of interest to people. So that was sort of, I just wanted to make good shoes that fit people well, that worked in a variety of situations, uh, in a variety of settings, terrains, climates, something that's like truly useful to you on a day-to-day basis in anybody's life. Um, and so that's the starting point um, of Turiff Footwear. I guess all along I was, starting a young family, and I was like in the past I had been wearing these traditional footwear, and they looked really great, but like this stuff wasn't functional. Also, from the aspects of like my newfound life as a dad, you're like moving around a lot. You know, you want to get involved with your kids. You
Yeah.
want to run after them quickly, and I was wearing these big clunky basically like logging boots from the West Coast. And then I was also really into the British dress shoes. And like I said, they look great. They look really cool, the heritage style stuff. But it just wasn't like conducive to the active lifestyle that I was finding myself in. So that was another aspect that I was thinking about. Just something really usable in life. And so that's where uh, that's what functional footwear is all about. Making shoes that are useful to your life, can travel with you no matter what situation you're putting yourself in, wherever you are, um, and just and they let your foot move naturally. Just because I saw such great benefits of allowing my foot to start being active again in my movement, um, and so I mean that's sort of
It's
where I've
quite
been thinking
quite
about.
striking how your career up to this point has been kind of like a little Harry Potter-esque or a little Disney-like, where you sort of were lured into this industry and discovered it was evil, and then you tried something else and you unlocked the forbidden knowledge that or most footwear was in fact not not good. Um, and I'm very following you along in a very emotional manner because it's quite fantastic what you're saying.
Well, hopefully it makes sense. I can get a little bit lost because there's been all sorts of, ins and outs of the career path, but
But it
I'm
was
glad
very
it.
interesting how you went from Nike, who are very much a company pushing out product, to the sort of heritage industry in Dayton, who've just been making the same type of boots forever, and then going to like a super Nike in California making custom sneakers for people who can afford them, and then sort of back to where you are now.
Sort of stripping it all away. Yeah, and I've had lots of good experiences all along the way, and I would say it's all been very helpful on the journey to inform the shoes that I'm creating right now. Um, and along the way, I've met so many good people, um, and the had the opportunity to learn, I guess, which is the most important thing. Um, just really, I want to bring the idea that we can create something that's not going to go out of style next year. That's going to actually going to be useful. I think a lot of the time when people are thinking about um, a product that like a timeless product, you don't really think of it quite as a usable product anymore, um, or not in the way that I'm hoping that it'll be usable. And so um, I'm trying to combine this like world of modern usability with the heritage world, which is filled with like great materials and great like old-fashioned construction that was made to last a really long time. Um, and I mean that's where we are with the Turiff footwear. Is where I don't know if you want to talk about the shoe too much, but we're
I'd love to
combining.
hear. I'd love to hear how you went from your revelations in the orthopedic industry to thinking, "Wow, I better make my own product." And what would that
Well,
be?
well, as I said, so I had these revelations working in orthopedics, and then just in my like fitness journey, um, that big bulky cushion supported footwear is not it's not for me at least. And I think that there's got to be a world of people who might be interested as well. I always loved, like I said, the crafted side of shoes, um, and having the skills as a shoemaker and enough machines in my own home studio. I set to work on making at first a pair of shoes that worked for me. That was like the starting point of the uh, the design process that led to where we are now. Um, so uh, early on, I was in a different house, excuse me, and I started making little prototypes in my kitchen at first. Um, and at first I wasn't as set on when you're into minimalist footwear, it's generally flat. There's no heel raise like in most other modern shoes. And so that wasn't a primary interest right at the beginning. the main thing was like I wanted to be I wanted the shoes to be really usable for my new like outdoor active lifestyle with kids, and I wanted to be really comfortable because we're out, we go out with the kids, we're trekking for a long time, going to the playground, doing whatever. So of course, I want my toes to have room to spread out. Um,
Mm.
and so the first iteration was wider. It did have a bit of a heel. Um, and from that first design sample that I made, I just kept making little tweaks and changes because I had the experience working um, making custom lasts for people. I knew how to, build a shape that I could create the shoe off of. I didn't have to stick with something that was pre-made from a factory. I think I've got um, some of my early samples. Like this was like one of my early design lasts. Um, so I had just taken a pre-existing shape. I built up on it, and I think originally I had taken a Birkenstock shape, and I just
Okay.
like I copied that a little bit, and then I wanted to make it uh, as aesthetically pleasing as I could because um, footwear, like I said earlier, we have an idea in our heads of like what shoes should be, like sleek, narrow, stylized, like beautiful forms. And like, don't get me wrong, they can look amazing dress shoes
Mm.
in this style. Um, but I like I really wanted that wide fit, but I wanted to do my best. Like always, I'm doing my best to make sure everything is aesthetically as nice looking as possible. Because I mean, as functional as I want the shoes, of course, we all appreciate something that looks good, and we can feel comfortable wearing at the same time. And once you do get into the wide toes, especially if you had not worn a shoe that's so broad in the front, it can feel a little bit awkward to start. Um,
Mm.
and so I really did my best to shape a last um, and create something that was, you know, even being so loud, so wide, still had a nice silhouette to it. Um, and so I was doing all this stuff out of my kitchen at first, and now in my little home workshop. Um, I've uh, I was trying out different styles. I said I worked in the Pacific Northwest. I worked at Dayton Boots. I've done design for other companies as well out there. Um, Notably, I guess it would be Viberg Boots over there. And I really like the aesthetic of those guys. And so, and as well, I like all the stuff that sort of comes out of that Pacific West area, the kind of rugged outdoor style hiking boots. So I was looking a lot at like vintage styles that came from them. I like the brand Danner and a lot of their old shoes that they were making in the
Mm.
70s, 80s, a lot of old Adidas hiking styles. So when I was developing the early style of the shoe, it was just I was looking at a lot of outdoor um, footwear for inspiration, um, drawing from like kind of original hiking aesthetic. Um, because I just thought it looked so great, and not a lot of people were producing anything like that at the time. Um, and what was the other aspect I was thinking of? Where am I? Got our last patterns. Um, well, I wanted to, in terms of construction, um, I wanted to, I don't know how well you can see this, but I wanted to take elements of the Pacific Northwest style of construction, shoe construction, um, but I wanted to create something that was like super easy for people to repair. Um,
Mhm.
and so what I ended up doing was a lot of those old Northwest logging boots are a stitch out construction. So the upper comes down and then it gets turned outwards, and you're stitching that to your midsole and often into your sole.
Mhm.
But I've created a combination construction which allows everything to be sewn together. So we've got on the inside, which we can't see here, but there's a stitch that sews the upper and the lining, the upper in the back section and the lining of the whole shoe to your insole, which is the foundation of the shoe. Maybe this is a little bit difficult to understand.
No, keep
Uh,
going.
and and then we're also sewn to the front of the midsole here, and that with the stitch. So this So it's a combination of Blake stitch, which maybe you've heard of.
Yeah.
Blake stitch is the inside stitching, uh, which, like I said, you can't see, but it is catching the whole upper. It is catching the leather snifter that you're using back here, and your lining. So it's all secured to your midsole. Um, the midsole is this thin leather here, and then we've got the front forefoot, which is stitched out, which is it's an old sort of waterproofing technique. Rather than tucking the shoe under, you're flipping out and allowing the water to run off if you're outdoors in the wet weather. And so, anyways, the upper of the shoe is all sewn to this leather midsole, and outside of that, we've got a slim cushion mid and a rubber outsole here, and these can be glued on, like cemented on, and peeled off quite easily by a cobbler. So this was the main focus, is like along with the function for your foot, function for your daily use. It's like functional in a way that these shoes are going to last a really long time. Um, so um, that was a key or really important aspect of the footwear design, was to create something that could be repaired and could, live with you and move with you
But
for a really long time.
Andrew, I mean, I can tell that you really know shoe design and how to make shoes, but you must be a terrible businessman because you're making them outside of fashion so you can wear them a long time and then you can repair them. I mean, how can you possibly get rich doing this?
Well, I mean, I guess that's not really the focus. Of course, I mean, of course, I'm hoping to make an income. That's the idea. Uh, Everybody's got to work for some way to make some money. But for some reason, my brain just doesn't seem to operate in the way that like that is the driving factor. The driving factor is to like create something that is good. Like that's like the easiest way to decide to define it. It's just like a product that is made well, something that works for you, the person who's wearing it. It's not about making you buy another pair next year. It's just I don't like, it doesn't make sense to me why we would want to make stuff that you gotta get rid of so quickly. It just like doesn't seem like a great path for the future of humanity if we're constantly throwing things away, making stuff that's going to break down quickly. Um, and like I said, I just want to help people. I want to offer people a good pair of shoes that fits really well, that works really well for them. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's weird because I mean, you got my point. I was joking,
yeah,
but
oh yeah.
it's just so incredibly at odds with Nike and everyone else and all the fashion shoes, and it's I mean, it's kind of, it shouldn't be strange, but it is kind of strange to hear your take on it because it's so different.
Well, just like I said, I felt what they were producing in most of the footwear world. Not everybody. There's of course other people making good shoes out there, um, but it felt so superficial, like we had lost our way on um, what shoes were really supposed to be. Um, and I mean, it's an interesting challenge. I think to work at something, trying to create something that, I mean, has appeal to people, um, that can generate some sort of income for me and my family, but
Mm.
also something that's not meant to be thrown away. So it is a bit of a paradox or
It
a
struck
challenge.
me when you were talking about the design process that you were designing the shoes really from the inside out for the foot foremost, and then an attractive design on the outside. Whereas I don't know, most modern shoes are designed very much from the outside with little concern for the inside, but you just hope that you'll find customers that can actually put their feet in them.
Well, I mean, I know that when people put their feet in these, they are happy with the fit. They like the feel. Um, um, and that was like part of the fit was I was really doing my best to create something like obviously there's so many different shapes and sizes of people in the whole world. Um, but I wanted to create something based on the many feet that I've seen that was like sort of a universal fit. So if we talk about the fit of these shoes is quite snug in the heel. It holds the foot nice and secure in the back, but the front really opens up. So you're really broad and you have a lot of space for your toes there in the front. Um, but yeah, it's just I was not like excited about what was being made in the footwear world anymore. Um, and it just seemed like there's a better path. And, um, you know, like I said, there are some other companies that are starting to do similar things that are really comfortable, really useful shoes. And I think that's great. I think that's sort of the approach that we should be taking to all of life here on the planet is, you know, being considerate with how we design stuff, thinking long term, um, you know, not about the instant fix or that quick gratification right now. Um, like my shoes, they aren't the cushy squish that you might want initially, but you wear them, you get used, your feet like will strengthen. Um, the idea with the open, wide, natural form is that when you can spread out, your toes, like I said, they get engaged again. The more you wear it, the more you'll start to realize that you know your toes are there. They're like if you look at a little kid and how their feet and their body can move. Like there's not, I mean, obviously there's, I guess, entropy that's working on us all the time, but uh, we can work against it. And getting yourself into open footwear like this lets your feet move. But if you're in constricted footwear, it shuts off that like the ability to move. When you have big cushion and support underneath, you're not using the little intrinsic muscles in your feet to help act as a shock absorber, to help propel you forward, to help stabilize and you know move yourself through life. And so I think that you know people are generally happier when they feel comfortable and strong within themselves. And these shoes, they're designed in a way to allow you to, you know, to work towards that, to feel strong, to add comfort to your life. And like I said, back just they are a great tool for a versatile tool for life. Um, they can dress up a little bit, dress down, uh, and I've added this the like outdoor kind of element to them because I find being outside, especially in like our modern world of hustle and bustle, like taking a break to get outside, it's like a really nice, like, well, breath of fresh air. Uh, there's just like so many benefits from being outside, you know,
Yeah.
going for a walk in nature. Um, and so that was another sort of undertone element of design that I just thought like I wanted to encourage people to be active and move outside. Again, you don't have to be like extreme about it. Like I said, I'm a bit of a fanatic when it comes to fitness and exercise, but like whatever people do, as long as you move a little bit, you get outside, like anything is going to be helping your body to move longer, move better uh, for life. Uh, so those
It's
are
interesting
again,
what you said there about you can sort of dress them up or dress them down because they are kind of an everything shoe. So you might only need that pair of shoes, whereas we're so accustomed to having shoes for every eventuality, probably several
yes,
of each.
that was also another bit of a frustration with mine is that like it seemed like the way footwear had become is that uh, like everything is like a niche. So like whatever activity you're doing, you change your shoes, change your shoes, change your shoes. And again, going back to like the family lifestyle with kids, kids. accumulate stuff. And like really all life, we accumulate stuff like crazy so quickly. And so having a versatile shoe is just a little, you know, effort to maybe help declutter a little bit. Maybe you don't need, 15 pairs of shoes. You can scale it down to three or something like that. Um, and maybe it can help you feel a little less stress in your life filled with stuff, like our modern world that's so filled with stuff.
Mm,
Uh, hoping to declutter a little bit.
yeah. Again, this anti-consumerist attitude. I mean, it's so at odds with how all the companies want us to behave now.
Yeah. Um, I just don't see a great future if like we just like push for like growth for growth's sake. It just like it seems like it can be done like maybe it can be done in a way that's like a little smarter, but um, that like obviously I think we should be striving to be better all the time. But like it seems like the attitude of the world, which I wasn't such a big fan of, is just like change and grow for the sake of growth without like having anything actually uh, you're not like adding anything useful. You're just like adding more and more junk.
Mm,
And so I don't, again, I don't, I think a lot of like the philosophy or conceptual ideas that I put behind the shoes really can be like applied to how we live on the planet. It's just like maybe if we like slow down a little bit, we become aware of what we're doing with ourselves, what we're like with the shoes. That's like part of the thing. We want to be aware with our movement because the impacts can be great, compounded over a long time, and that's can be easily translated to how we live today. It's like if we're not aware of what we're doing, if we're just like constantly pushing forward without like thinking about the impacts, well, we're not going to find ourselves in a very great
yeah.
place, probably.
You've
Um,
almost got a full lifestyle concept there. So you can start adding more products now, and you'll have a full. It's
well,
a slippery
I
slope.
would Yeah, I'd like to do a boot, but keep it really minimal. Like you need, like I said, you only need a couple different shoes for a complete lifestyle, I think.
Mm,
And of course, it's super fun to work on new styles, designs, but you know, to take it slow, not just grow for growth's sake, no change. I think that's actually one area I really don't want to get into. It's like I know a lot of people might feel frustrated with like you've got your pair of shoes that you really like the fit of, and then like next year comes around and they've changed how that same style fits.
mm.
Like brands will often change the shape of the shoe, and um, that's one area I really don't want to be. Uh, moving in. I want to keep my last. It's very versatile. It can work as an active shoe. It can work as a just like an everyday walker.
Mm.
Um, it doesn't need to be changed, and just for the sake of a change next year. So,
But you haven't intentionally just made the two models and stuck with that, at least for the time being.
well, I mean that's our starting point. Like I said, I'd like to make a boot. Where I live, we get a lot of snow. I mean, maybe where you live, you get a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Um, and so, from a functional standpoint, I would like a taller option. And that's in the works. I've been working on a few different style ideas. Um, I got one here I pulled out, sort of reminiscent of some of the old hikers that you see in the West Coast again. Um, but yeah, just minimal change, just create something that's usable for people, something that can be worn for a really long time, uh, no matter where your life takes you.
Now, I understand you're not making every single pair of shoes in your
No,
workshop.
I've set up with the factory in El Salvador, um, and so they're producing the shoes because if I make them myself, it takes quite a long time. Especially like I don't have a lot of machines in my own little workshop. I'm good for creating uppers. Like I can make a pair of shoes, but it's much slower than the automated factory process. Um, and I was really interested in offering these shoes to a wide selection of people. And I mean, my price point is not the cheapest, but I think it's like a really great value for what you get. You get something that is made with really nice materials. We're using uppers from CF Stead, which is a really old, historic, and well-respected tannery in England. Um, and everything throughout the shoes, except for down to your slim cushion midsole and the rubber outsole, it's all leather. Um, we're using a leather stiffener in the back, so that's what gives you a little shape and structure in the heel. I found like most modern shoes nowadays are using a plastic stiffener in the back, and those things will break down over time. And they hold the shape that they are made with. Whereas when we use leather is really great material in that like it will mold to you. So the fit by itself is really nice and comfortable. But the great thing about the materials that we're using for the shoes is that they last a really long time, and you're going to get a personalized fit. So leather with a little bit of heat and moisture from your foot and your movement, it's going to take your shape. So in the back, that little bit of structure there with time will really start hugging your foot, which is nice. But yeah, so I'm using the factory in El Salvador. Um, I got connected with them just from one of my contacts that I've got in footwear. Um, I actually started the process with a factory in Mexico, um, and we were working through it, but it's not the easiest style of shoe making. And an interesting thing about using the the wide toe is a lot of footwear machinery is set up for a narrow toe. So
Oh,
you're putting your shoe to do whatever operation you're doing. The shape is somewhat predefined, and a lot of machines are not made to set up. You need specific uh, pieces that are made to fit the wide toe box. Um, and so it got a little bit too much for the factory in Mexico. They weren't excited to carry on with the project just because they were finding it too difficult. So I ended up going with the place in El Salvador, and they have done a really great job adapting their factory and their methods to all my minute little requests. I could tell throughout the process that I was a little more annoying than most of their design uh, customers. But like I said, it's so important to me that I don't see the point in doing it like halfway, um, because that already exists. Um, so um, I was adamant on a lot of there's little compromises here and there, but um, I will strive those little things. I'm going to continue to try and poke at and improve each time, but not in the greater scale of things. Like the fit or the materials. I don't want to compromise and move to something like synthetic materials, um, or what just whatever. I just want to maintain the integrity of the design, and quality, because that's the most important thing.
so with all your contacts in the footwear industry, what do your former colleagues and contacts think of what you're doing now?
I mean,
Do they say,
some
Andrew, he's gone mad?
no, I mean some are very like encouraging, and they just think like, oh, it's great. You're trying, to get out there, do your own thing. That's really exciting. Um, way to take the jump. And then others, it's harder uh, to have conversations with them when like a lot of the way that I've decided to take things in my footwear approach is like counter to how so much of the footwear world operates. Um, and it's been a, a slog in a way. You're constantly fighting upstream with the norms of the footwear world, with the big brands, just to try and get heard, try and get seen. And so not everybody agrees with what I'm trying to put out there or is open to it, I guess. But I would say like if a wide toe shoe with like slim cushion, like minimal cushion, and a lot of ground feel is like scary to you, you just gotta try it really because once you do, um, you'll start to feel like I can talk all the time about the benefits and like what it feels like, but unless you really feel it for yourself, I don't. It's very hard to explain the benefits and that comfort that you will get. Um, so yeah, people in the footwear industry. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed it. You're very up on what's going on, I think. Uh, it seems like there's a bit of a push. Like certain brands are starting to open up to wider fits. There's a big minimalist kind of trend that seems to be happening right now, or coming around. If anybody's into fitness or athletics, um, in that world, the like most like say you're looking on Instagram or something like that at fitness influencers, a lot of them are starting to wear more and more barefoot shoes or no shoes at all.
Hmm,
So I
that's
think
interesting.
there's starting to be a turn. Like people are starting to accept the idea that like, hey, maybe there is something to this. Um, and so I'm hopeful that we'll see. Like, I mean, it doesn't have to negate the rest of narrowed conventional shoes, but for those who really want to give themselves comfort and work on what I see a great help to your strength, mobility, and just like longevity of comfort in life. I think going this route is like an easy thing to jump on.
You were saying about how sort of barefoot shoes are a thing because both my sister and my brother are very into the barefoot shoes.
Yeah.
So this episode is one that will be very much appreciated, at least by my sister. Um, but I get the impression that that's kind of a sort of weird subculture about barefoot. But if major shoe brands are making wider fits now, I think that must be a fashion thing because they see that they can sell more wider shoes. They're
Yeah.
sort of desperate for a new look. I saw
I
one
mean,
of the
sorry.
British companies I know posted now that they were making a new collection of stitch down shoes, which would they looked cheaper than they normally are, but they were really sort of stuck down because there was a piece of text on their website that they could not repair these stitch down shoes. And I'm thinking, is that the best you can do in 2025? Why are you now going over to? I mean, they've always made Granson Goodyear welted shoes. Why are you now making shoes you can't repair?
Yeah, it
It's just
doesn't.
crazy.
I don't know why you'd go backwards on that one. But I mean, hopefully, unfortunately, I think like right now, people are hurting in the world. Like everybody is um, has to less money to consume with, or at least they're feeling a little bit. Um,
Mm.
and so perhaps some companies are deciding that they want to cheapen their product even more. Um, I would argue that, maybe you save up a little bit and you get something that can last longer. That seems like a better option from my perspective. Uh, Going to the like different sects, the sort of subcultures of of barefoot to regular footwear. Definitely, the barefoot world is a unique uh, group of people, and they're incredibly vocal and uh, passionate
Yeah.
from what I've seen. I think like sometimes the barefoot world's a little bit too extreme in their approach to like how they want to get in other people, um, like how they want to encourage other people to get into the barefoot world. I do think the benefits are there. They're really comfortable. It's going to help you out. But I don't think that we need to be so extreme on the approach. Like the way my shoes are a really nice transitional shoe for people who are interested in it. They're not the most flexible. You can get some. barefoot shoes that are like completely nothing, right? Like this is actually a sample that we made in the factory, um, just of an athletic shoe. Uh,
Okay.
but mine are, there's a little more rigidity. There's that little bit of cushion. We've got a 6 millimeter midsole there just to add a little bit of softness. But you do still get a really great ground feel and great flexibility and movement in your foot and in the shoe. Um, but uh, you know, whether you got to go to work and wear your, tightened up Oxford shoe with your suit, some people might. On the afternoon and the weekend, you're walking your dog, you're taking your kids outside, you go for a hike, just opening your toes up for a little bit in something different. It's going to be beneficial for you. Um, and so these you can be a barefoot nut, or you can be just like a hobbyist. But to me, it's just like it's all helping towards better foot health. Uh, when I'm making the shoes, we're making something that's going to last you a long time. That's great. Uh, but I I don't want to be like so fanatical about the barefoot aspect. The shoes are for anybody. Um, I would not recommend you go like run a marathon in them right away out of the gate. You do have to like build up your strength and stuff like that. But right out of the box, if you've never been into barefoot shoes before, they're just going to feel really comfortable. Um, and like I say, you're going to feel a little more connection with the ground, a little more connection with your body as you feel things a little bit more. The word is proprioception. You gain this awareness, um, and a little bit or a lot. I mean, it's better than nothing. And so I would encourage anybody to try them out,
Hmm.
whether it's mine or any kind of wide toe,
Is
just to
it?
see the benefit.
It's about a year now since you launched, is it?
In February, I got my stock, but it's been
Okay,
a slow
yeah,
process.
9 months or so. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there must be a fair few pairs out in the world now. What sort of feedback are you getting from people wearing them?
Um, well, only good feedback, which is uh, pretty crazy so far.
That's incredible.
Yeah, everybody who has them is really keen on them. A lot of people have been reaching out saying like they're kind of interested. They've had issues with fitting, and that's the other aspect is like it doesn't have to just be about um, you want to be a barefoot guy. Maybe you just like a lot of people have trouble fitting shoes, and that goes back to the design of the shape, the last. It's just they're meant to be more forgiving for people's feet. And that's been a really big thing that I've heard is from customers, just that like they're blown away by the comfort of them compared with regular shoes. Some people say that they've ruined other shoes for them because they don't want to put on their like narrower stuff anymore. Um, and uh, some of my like favorite things that people comment is that like they feel that they're really like thoughtfully designed, which I mean that makes me feel good because I really did try to think about like every possible aspect of the wearing experience and the fit and just like how it's going to impact the world and everything I tried to consider while I was creating the shoe. Again, back to like living in this like idealistic world. I just wanted to create like a perfect product as far as I could. Um, and again, I'll just keep striving for that as I move forward.
I'm curious. Are you happier now than you were, say, 12 years ago?
Uh, I mean, I think a lot more than I did when I was 12 years ago. Um, and I'm happy. Like I gotta say, it has nothing to do with anything, but my like family life, I love that stuff. That's like the best part of of life is to, have kids and, see them running around and growing. Um, and the great thing about having my own company is that I can work at home. I can be here with my family. If anybody needs me, I'm, not too far away. Um, I'm happier producing this kind of shoe than I was producing other types of shoes. but like I said, it's been a progression. Like so, like little things over time have like slowly opened my mind up. And so like back then, I was having a good time pretty much, but I wasn't thinking in the same like the same way as I am now. I've grown and developed inside it in a way, and I think it's more like maybe meaningful now how I'm producing shoes. And uh, back then, it was superficial. Like along with the kind of shoes I was producing, my lifestyle was more superficial. It was about like, you know, what I was wanting to consume, what uh, I mean, it was just that consumption world that I was like trying to get into of the big brands. Um, I don't know if that makes any sense, but now as I, slowly get a little bit older and older and different things happen in life, you see what's important. And actually, that's one thing I like to connect it to is um, like we're often very concerned with what, like, oh, what's the next thing I got to get? What's the next product? What's this? What's the next product I'm going to consume? And that's another aspect that I like to tie into creating something that's so versatile. It's like you can kind of quiet that constant urge, or I'm hoping to help quiet that constant urge for consumption, uh, and say like, okay, my footwear needs at least are dealt with, so I can not think about that, and I can think about like more important things in life, like rather than what I'm going to buy next. I can think about my family, my friends, being active, trying to improve my life.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if that's relevant or if it makes any sense, but
Yes,
it's
it
another
certainly
thought
does.
that I got.
I have mentioned it a few times previously on the podcast about how marketing drives so much of our consumption or our need to consume, because what with big data and all the algorithms and all the marketing science, we are just swamped in marketing all the time. And of course, when you were with Nike, that would have been an aspect as well, that they have to be marketing all the time because they've got new product that has to get out there. What's it like for a one person company like you to sort of get a foot in the door, so to speak, in that massive marketing machine to get out there?
Well, you know what? I was really like part of the way that I tried to go about things. I was trying my hardest to avoid marketing as much as possible, just because
Mm,
it didn't feel right. It feels a bit manipulative to me, in
yep.
a way that it's marketing. You're preying on people's psychological tendencies and weaknesses in a way, right? A lot of the time.
Mm,
And so my approach, I was hoping to just like provide information. I'm going to tell you about the story of how I got here. I'll tell you how I decided to make the shoes, how the design is, but it's not about, like I said, it's not driving like a new thing each year all the time. It's all I can do is provide information. So that's my strategy. But I found, unfortunately, it's so hard to be in the world on your own, without a big budget behind you, trying to get heard in these, various channels that you can get yourself seen
yeah.
in. Um, and I've had to like make concessions, and you know, I don't know how to, use a little bit of seeding, they call it, give pairs away here and there to people to try and get them in front of the right people. Like from a realistic point of view, I have to like adapt a little bit, but it has been like frustrating to see that the world, like like I said, I've tried so hard to create such a good product, uh, and it just like in this big world we live in of noise, it's very difficult for that to
Yeah.
stand on its own. So you do, I get myself on Instagram. I'm not like a tech savvy guy or anything, but I'm doing my best to produce some uh, informative videos and things like that.
Yeah.
I really like taking photos, and so if you want to see some nice photos of the shoes, I put those up um,
Yeah.
on Instagram, and it gives me an opportunity to get outside again uh, with the shoes because I don't live really close to any like city center or anything like that, but there's a lot of nice nature trails. So
Mm.
I go out with my kids or just on my own a little bit in the weekend to take photos, and so that's a bit self-serving, that style of marketing of just giving myself an opportunity to be outside again. But yeah, it's a world of it's still challenging to navigate marketing. Um,
So
you know,
it's
I
a terrible conundrum how to both or sort of you have to sell shoes, but how do you also not sell shoes?
exactly. I'm constantly battling with myself of like, like how much can I let myself into that world a little bit just to make sure that I do, you know, sell the product, sell the shoes, um, while still maintaining my what I feel is like my personal integrity, I guess, in that category.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's definitely challenging.
I hope it works out. I hope it really hope it does.
Yeah.
Andrew, is there anything we should have covered that we haven't covered?
Um, I mean, well, foot functional shoes. Have I described it enough? Like what the concepts that it's about foot freedom, about freedom for yourself. I, freedom sometimes doesn't sound like I don't like the word that much, even though it describes exactly what it is. But um, it's just I want us to have the ability through these shoes somehow. I'm hoping that I can inspire people to be active, be comfortable, and just like maybe go against the flow of convention sometimes. Doesn't, we do have to follow some norms, I guess, in the world, but like, you don't have to
Mm.
wear that sleek, narrow shoe. You don't have to be just exactly how everything is set up to be. Maybe we can fight against that. Maybe you can have a breath of fresh air in this like constant world of pressure.
Well, there we go. Thanks a lot, Andrew. It was inspiring to hear about your philosophy behind shoes. Thank you very much for joining me here today, and bye bye for now.
Thank you very much for having me, Nick. Have a great day.